Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Candice Pressinger from Elevon Merchant Services. I'm the Director of Customer Data Security, Fraud, and Payment Optimization. And what that means is I look after everything that reduces risk, reduces cost, reduces friction, and helps merchants get the most successful outcomes first time. So today, I'm here to talk to you. Oh no, the slides are not in the right order. Let me tell you what I'm supposed to talk to you about. Right. So I'm going to be talking to you today about AI at the gates, stopping payment fraud before it starts. Now, it's really, really important. We're hearing a lot about AI and how we can apply it, but I think that it's really doing great things for us internally and industry, but it's also supercharging the attackers. So we need to really start thinking about how we do things differently and embrace AI to stop the bad guys. So I think my slides are all out of order. Okay. Right. So as I mentioned, AI is supercharging the attackers to do really bad things. This particular slide, I think, is particularly pertinent because it shows that if cybercrime were a country, it would have the third largest GDP in the world, behind the United States and China, and quite well ahead of a lot of developed countries. It's really lucrative, and organized crime being powered particularly by AI at the moment. So what are we seeing really powered by AI? That cybercrime is taking things to its whole new level. AI is helping change the face of crime. It's not just about card fraud, it's about identity theft, loyalty account takeovers, and really very, very sophisticated crime that we haven't been seeing to date. We've seen a 2,000% increase in deepfakes powered by AI, and the bot attacks are really, really very prolific. We see this a lot across our merchant base. And cybercrime costs, they are all up and up, going to be around 12 trillion by 2028. So my slides are all back to front. And card fraud is not slowing down. And some of the things that the fraudsters are doing with AI, scraping data and synthetic identity theft, all designed to monetize and perpetrate card fraud, are really, really on the up. And unfortunately for our merchants, as an acquirer, we see the costs are rising, and that's no good for the whole ecosystem because those costs end up needing to be passed back to cardholders, you and me alike, and sucked up by our merchant base. So we really, really need to start thinking about how we're going to tackle this rise of cybercrime powered by AI. So what are the types of things we're seeing across our merchant base when it comes to fraud? So we're seeing a huge uptick in phishing campaigns, carding attacks. So again, AI, we used to remember some of these phishing emails. They were completely obvious. You could spot them a mile off, but AI is really changing the face of phishing, and they're having a great deal of success with that. Account takeover fraud. So we see this a lot in our hospitality and airline verticals, where they have a lot of loyalty accounts that aren't particularly well protected by the likes of PCI DSS because they don't process card payments, but they contain an awful lot of data. They have loyalty points which are tantamount to money and are easy to steal and hard to reclaim, so again, costing our merchants a lot. And hospitality, where everything's about personalization, marketing, making that experience unique to a customer, but for that, they gather more and more data. And AI, screen scraping, building a picture of a true customer, and then filling the details to then monetize is becoming more and more common. So bot fighting is never ending. We have many examples of that that we need to start thinking seriously about. But as I say, abuse of data, using AI to steal that data and become more sophisticated in the crime is a real big trend we are seeing. And the financial services sector is the most targeted industry for account takeovers that we've seen. So what I wanted to really talk about today is how fraud prevention, security needs to be looked at much earlier in the process. So traditional fraud prevention starts with rules-based, looking at a card holder at the checkout. And it's very labor-intensive, hard to manage, and it doesn't look at the cardholder per se and behavioural in analytics and all the sophisticated things that we need to start looking at in our next generation capabilities. So we look at fraud prevention, pre-authentication before the transaction will even hit our environment. And we look at the cardholder, and we look at a multitude of fraud signals. We use various different things that determine whether a transaction should be stopped before it even gets through to us, or stops fraud chargebacks and things before they can even happen. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how we do that and what's so sophisticated about the AI next generation solutions. And we're always looking at what's coming next. And as I mentioned, there are, proliferation of bot attacks and the use of AI to create honeypots to distract bots, send them down a cul-de-sac, and allow good business to continue. But we'd often think about these things way too far down the line. So we're starting to now put these things, pre-authentication, right up front. And even before the payment, we start looking at the whole fraudster journey from account sign-up and behavioral analytics before they even get to a payment. So, as mentioned, I think it's really important that we start to look at not only identity and payments. We need to start looking way back in the journey at the different fraud signals that we can see. And our AI machine learning solutions, they look at hundreds of different signals. To stay ahead, we need visibility across the entire range of those signals to give a transaction a risk score and say with a very high degree of certainty that this thing is going to end up as a fraud chargeback. And that we can do this in real time, in nanoseconds, building a picture, and it's constantly being updated using a vast array of data elements. So one of the other things that's super important about using AI in fraud detection and having it right up front is looking at, not just looking at a card, looking at the cardholder in their entirety. So if you can see, we call him Zachary Morgan there in the middle, we would look at everything that he's attached to, including other people. We would look at how many cards he's registered, where he's based, has he got previous chargebacks in his history, and where the cards he's using from one country and he's located in another, how many devices is he attached to, the velocity of attempts, and interestingly, we would look at who he's connected to. So the person, JS there, they could be a complete innocent, but because they're attached to a fraudster or a known fraudster, because he has a whole multitude of indicators to say he is likely to be a fraudster, this JS would be weighted accordingly and be reviewed and not just allowed through to make payment. So it looks at the entirety of the fraudster, and it does this in milliseconds before a transaction is even allowed through to our processing host. And that's thousands of signals being processed. So another really important thing that we look at when we build these models to stop fraud at the gates is we don't just look at maybe 5 or 6 rules and just looking at the card and we have a very high fraud rate. We look at all data across all industries, all verticals, and other acquirers. We all pull the information together to pick up on new fraud that is emerging in different parts of the ecosystem and updating those models and making sure that they are factoring into the scores that get given to the merchant to decide whether to block that payment or whether to allow it to go through. So that's emails, IP addresses, geolocation, lots and lots of different things coming through to determine the score that is given to any transaction. And as we know, we're a global industry, and fraud is local and global. So it's borderless, it moves really fast, and we need to be able to flash these different facets up. As I mentioned, you can buy a whole bunch of cards we all know from the dark web, and we can run through them, but they're from all different countries, and we'll just try our luck. But this will pick up any sort of anomalies that show that cards are from here and cards are from there, but you're based here, and that should definitely be a factor in the risk score for a transaction. So why is all of this really, really important? So obviously, security and fraud are the cornerstone of what I call payment optimization. So what we want to do really is to stop merchants from suffering the pain of fraudulent chargebacks. Now, I'm not sure how aware you'll be of the different types of chargebacks that a merchant will experience, but one of the hardest to defend is fraud chargebacks. It has the lowest win rate of all the different chargebacks. That takes a lot of operational time for merchants and costs associated with it. So one chargeback will cost the merchant typically 1.5 times the ticket value. And this is a huge issue for merchants. Everyone's in business to make money, and it's a $362 billion problem for merchants globally. Now, in a bid to try and stop those fraud chargebacks coming through, merchants are having to block more transactions, and they end up blocking the good to try and stop the bad. So that problem is actually $645 billion. So it's a real conundrum, and where we as an industry and as an acquirer, we feel we have a role to play in helping the merchant with the sophisticated solutions at the front, before the transactions even come through, to stop those from turning into fraud chargebacks and to increase acceptance rates by the sophistication that we can apply to determine which ones are bad, which ones should be looked at and maybe stepped up to strong customer authentication, and then which ones should actually go through and have a frictionless process. So we can then apply exemptions to those transactions and really help shift the balance between stopping the bad and stopping good customers. And there is an interesting stat I saw that 42% of customers that go and want to buy something and get blocked, they won't come back. So that's a sale potentially lost to a merchant. So it's really about using advanced fraud tools powered by AI with a level of sophistication, stop the bad and allow the good. And investing in AI does mean much less manual overhead for merchants and a much greater degree of certainty that they are only stopping the bad and are allowing good business to keep flowing through. So all these things, they are really, really exciting. We help our merchants to achieve, 5% increase in successful auth rates using the tools that we have. But having implemented these tools, I think it's really important to point out that it's not, AI is very whizzy and exciting, but it's definitely about the governance and not the gloss. We have in Europe, not over in North America just yet, but we have the AI Act came in, and the whole General Data Protection Regulation. Those two regulations, they are very, very stringent about how we deploy and how we use these tools, and they're subject to model risk governance and a whole host of things. So when you're thinking about introducing AI, working with vendors, or even implementing it internally as a merchant for all the fantastic things it can do, there are definitely many things to be considered, the regulatory requirements, doing impact assessments, and making sure that your vendors are compliant with all those things, and to keep governance at the forefront and always maintain human oversight. AI is fantastic, but the human in the loop piece is really fundamental to that. So if I can have 3 takeaways from today. AI is redefining fraud. As I said, it's a very lucrative, organized business and is generating a very nice GDP for country cybercrime. It's shifting the paradigm where we would look at rules, 5 or 6 rules, and just deem something high risk or low risk, and it had a fairly low hit rate. We can look at adaptive and learning defense AI right up front before a transaction can even turn bad and ruin a merchant's business. The threat, and I think the thread of this conference is about how everything is always evolving, and the things that we had, defenses we had, they were adequate and great. But as AI is coming in and powering the fraudsters, we do need to adapt and fight fire with fire. I always think it needs to be fighting fire with foam, because that might be more effective. But we have to be able to do these things in real time and right up front. And being precise, that balancing act we talked about, the real problem for our merchants wanting to be in business, profitable business, and stay in business, not have all the silent margin erosion of fraud chargebacks and stopping good business for the effort to try and stop bad business, means that we do need to implement more and more of these things right up front to help. And it isn't just from the checkout. It starts right from account sign up. So I think we as an organization, are very passionate about covering the whole fraudster journey and having AI right up front at the gates. So thank you very much for coming to the session today. I'm Candice Pressinger. Please do find me or find me on LinkedIn. And thank you very much.